Hi, thank you for joining me in tonight's webinar. I am going to talk about loose leash walking, and I probably should mention that that's a little unusual for me, but I am very, very interested in the process of finding ways to make dog training easier for average people who don't want to spend all their time training their dog. They got a dog to love it, not to train it, and that differentiates us trainers from everyone else. And I think we could work tirelessly and try to improve the average person's ability to train their dog. So to do that, we need to look at the issues that face average dog trainers or dog people. And considering how many of us as trainers really struggle with loose leash walking, if we really think about it and talk about it, it seems like a good place to start. So I'll go ahead and start talking about what I have in mind here. I'm calling this cutting corners to loose leash walking. Cutting corners because I involve circles, which I'll talk about at length, and also because this is a fast method. This works really, really quickly if it's going to work well for your team. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. What is loose leash walking and what is heeling? So it's important to differentiate these. These are not the same thing. Heeling is a very formal activity. It's usually on the left side. The dog usually is expected to stop when you halt. It comes from a military background. That's where we originally learned it. And it is primarily for the handler. So when I see a team walking down the street and the dog is exactly next to the handler and the leash tends to be short and they're sort of marching along, I understand that the dog is getting a degree of exercise, but they don't usually look like they're having fun. Now, of course, you also have heeling that's fun and the owner uses a lot of food and is making it engaging. And that's certainly fun for the dog, but it starts to look like training, not walking. Loose leash walking is what most people really want to do with their dog. They just want to go. They don't care that much if it's on the left side or the right side. What they're looking for is a pleasant outing with the dog. So the dog is getting to sniff a little bit and look around a little bit and explore a little bit. And the handler is getting to move forward and maybe socialize with the neighbors and stop appropriately. But it's not all about the dog and it's not all about the handler. Why do we want loose leash walking? Well, when you have loose leash walking, everyone gets out. Everyone gets some exercise. Everyone can socialize. There's no reason not to stop and interact with people or even other dogs. And I think for many of us, walking with a dog is very soothing. It's some quiet time with our dogs. But that does assume that we're not being dragged around. So why don't we all just go out and get loose leash walking? First of all, dogs walk faster than humans. So a natural dog's gait, trotting along, is much faster than a human. So the dog is always being constricted. Dogs have different interests than we do. So dogs want to look at the trees and the grass, and we want to maybe look at the houses, but we tend to want to move in a straight line. We're very goal-oriented as a species, whereas the dog wants to wander. Another issue is that it's not that unusual for dogs who are energetic and excited to lose their interest in food when they're out for a walk. And that makes traditional training methods very difficult to apply. Another issue, the world is an unpredictable place. And in great dog training, we try to find locations that are very simple and easy for us. The world does not make that possible. So most of us don't have stretches of places where we can really practice loose leash walking, even if we are inspired to do so, because the moment we take it from our living room out into the real world, there is such a big jump. And that's for dog trainers. Now, if you're talking about the general population, when you tell them they have to teach it in their house and in their backyard and in the front yard, maybe for weeks, they kind of lose motivation. So you add that to the fact that they can't find an easy location to train, and that even when they find an easy location, you have what I call arousal spikes because a squirrel went by. Things happen in the real world, and that does complicate teaching quite a bit. Good training is usually in a quiet space. And then finally, most people who are walking their dogs, they don't want to train, they want to walk. And loose leash walking can end up being something that you maintain forever. Great for a dog trainer, less great for your average person. That's not their interest. They just want to walk. Do we have methods for teaching loose leash walking? Absolutely. We have some great ones, but there are a few things that we need. You need a dog in the right frame of mind to learn, because loose leash walking training by definition means that the dog is aware that they are taking in information and hopefully they are changing their behavior accordingly. The problem is a lot of dogs, once they get out into the real world, they are not thinking very well anymore because their arousal level's too high. They're not in the right frame of mind for learning, especially with dogs that I would say are environmental, i.e. that means dogs that are they're constantly looking around. It's their natural way of interacting with the world. They tend to be environmentally focused rather than handler focused. And those dogs are the ones that are the first to lose their food motivation. So you start out with a dog who's energetic and very environmental, and they're no longer in the right frame of mind to learn. So that kind of takes a lot of methods of teaching loose leash walking off the table. The other thing that can work is if you have a dog that is consistently food motivated, you can use lots of methods. And if you have a handler who is consistently motivated to stick with it, that does get you around that. And then you do have some really good options for teaching loose leash walking. If you have a dog that's not doing well with the traditional approach for whatever reason, what is the end result? If you can't get loose leash walking with a dog who's cooperating, one of the big issues is frustration. The dog wants to move quickly, they can't. So the handler stops so that the dog learns not to pull. That raises frustration. As you're raising the frustration level, the dog's ability to think is going down. So you're starting a spiral which is very frustrating, and it becomes a very controlling thing where the handler's, damn it, I'm gonna do this thing and you're gonna go my way, and the dog needs to move, and the dog gets more and more frustrated. That's a problem. When that happens, what tends to happen is handlers, because it's a mindset and it's a frustration in the handler too, they are much more likely to go to compulsion. They're like, look, I can put a prong collar on the dog and solve it. And that's an understandable response because they want to walk their dog. So I'd like to find ways to avoid that. And I recognize that means that the handler is going to have to give a little, and we might have to look at this a little differently. The other thing that happens, some handlers will not go to compulsion. That's fine. They stop walking the dog. They just say, I'm not having fun anymore. And they are so frustrated that nobody's going to get out. And that's also very understandable. All right, so what can we do about it? Well, I might have a solution for you. I will tell you where it came from. I walk my older dog every day, and I watch the people walking the horses, riding the horses. And the young horses are very, very lively when they first come out in the spring. And what I noticed is how much time was spent allowing the horses to circle to get their energy out. So the first thing is that starts often in the arena, right? I can see them. So before they even take them on the street, they go ahead and work down their energy. And I don't talk about that in this presentation, but you're absolutely welcome to do that if you think that will help. And the second thing I noticed, once the horses get out, they don't think in terms of just going in straight lines. They tend to work the horses on circles. The horse starts to pick up some speed, they start to circle. And if the horse starts getting more agitated, they start to go back and forth between what works best for this horse. Should they open up the circle so the horse can move a little more, or they tighten it up to remind the horse that they exist? So I've been watching this on and off and thinking about how this may or may not benefit us. And I noticed the relationship between young, nervous, excitable horses in public and this solution. And it seemed to be a possibility for us as dog people as well. What can we do with circles? So I started playing with it. I went out with one dog, and within one lesson I said, there's a lot of potential to this method. Unfortunately, I didn't tape that first one, but right away I saw how this could work. In particular, with a high energy dog, if you think about it, if you're standing in the middle of a circle and you're only walking a few feet, the dog isn't pivoting around you and you're not standing on a spot. But if you allow for some walking and the dog is on the outside, if you're on the inside of the circle and the dog is on the outside, the dog moves way more than you do, which is great for a high energy dog. So think about it like if you had a toddler, a little 2-year-old child, and you were out for a walk and the kid is running around you, which by the way is fairly common. You've probably seen that, as opposed to walking next to the parent holding their hand quietly. You don't see a lot of that because they can't do it. They have the same issues. So the parent lets them run around them and zoom back and forth, and that works really well, but the child has to stay close by. Circles also work very well for higher energy handlers. So some people like me really don't like to stop and just stand still. But I don't mind walking. As long as I'm moving, I'm pretty comfortable. So I'm moving in circles, the dog's moving in circles, much happier pair. Circles are also great for dogs that tend to stress up or frustrate easily. So if you have a dog that hits the end of the leash, even gently, and you stop walking to teach the dog not to pull, and the dog becomes agitated because they need to move, circles are a great answer because you're not stopping the dog's energy. Dogs with low food motivation are great for this method. So those are dogs that you take them out and they could care less about your food. So that really does take some of your training options off the table because you cannot reinforce much of anything. Puppy socialization. I love this for puppy socialization because the puppy gets to explore and it's dog directed. So the puppy can show you where they want to go because they're not on the left side or the right side. They're a lot of freedom, but they're not allowed to drag you. But rather than stopping hard and making them come back, you can work a circle. I'll show all of these things in video in a minute, so this should be fairly clear. Decompression walks. We're hearing a lot about that these days. And the idea is that the dog gets out and gets to breathe and smell and be a dog. And the reality is that for many teams, they live in more urban environments. The dog must be on a leash. And they're struggling a little bit to combine the idea of a decompression walk, which is for the dog, with not being dragged around. So circles can help you get there. It's also, honestly, it's a great option for people who want to train as little as possible. They want to walk, they don't want to train. Your average pet person who just wants to enjoy themselves, this can work really well. And as a bonus, it tends to work fast. So if it's going to work for you, you probably know this within a few lessons because right away you'll start to notice that the dog is giving on the leash. All right, let's spend some time talking about how we do it. The method in a nutshell is that when the dog pulls, you're going to make a circle. The dog is on the outside of the circle. Remember, we want the dog to exhibit energy. It's ideal if you can start with a slightly tired dog. So if your dog will play ball in the backyard first, this is going to be a little easier for you, but it's not required. It's just a little easier. And this is an interesting thing. Unlike most training, this is an example where a longer session is actually going to be better because we're not actually doing operant training here. We're not really trying to teach the dog, if you pull, then we circle. The dog does figure that out, but that's not really what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is keep frustration down. The longer you are out and the longer the dog is taking in the world and the less excited they are simply by virtue of stewing out there, the easier it's going to be for the dog. So a long session is perfectly fine. It's fine to stay out there for an hour as long as the dog and you are happy. All right, we're going to look at Lyra. We're going to start with some videos. The videos have been strung together over, I believe, 3 sessions. Lessons 1 and 2 are not taped, unfortunately. Each lesson is approximately 15 minutes. That was more about the amount of time my drone would fly, because I know somebody will see that, than it was about the ideal length of a lesson. Some of the challenges that Lyra has. She is a herding dog. She has a typically high need to move her body. She could care less about food when she is in public, and she is highly environmental. She loves the world. She does have some advantages, though. She is handler responsive. I mean, she's been trained for many years, so she does tend to look to me when she's unsure, even though in the real world, the outside world, she does it much less than she would at home or in a training environment. Lyra is also a very bright dog. She's smart. She learns very fast what the expectations are. I find her an easy to manage size. She's about 50 pounds. Anytime a dog is about 1/3 of your size, you're probably going to be okay. I find her easy to manage. And she is working with a professional trainer. So it's always a benefit because it will occur to me faster than it might to a pet person that I need to change direction if that's the case. All right, we're going to go ahead and start looking at some video, and I will stop as we go along and talk about things. All right, so you see I'm out there with the drone. Isn't that nice? I've started her in an area where we're just circling. Here I am spending some time letting her circle before we go out in the world. That's what I wanted to show you there. In this case, she's on the outside of the circle, and then we change direction right about there, and she stays on the outside. I will tell you that I think most dogs have a natural side that they do well on, and that's fine. All right, here we go on our walk. See, that's what I mean by a circle. My feet face where I want to go. I'm going to stop and let her sightsee. That's fine. And we continue on our way. The leash tightens. I stop. I backed up a little because I'm also looking at tension on the leash. Can you see how much slack is in the leash? That's not completely random. You want enough slack that the dog can move around. If the dog starts to surge, it's going to matter. So leash handling comes up. You'll see more of this later on. What's happening here in this video? As I'm coming forward, you can see 2 people coming towards me. Now, for reasons that are not clear to me, they split up, even though they're together, which really complicated my life. But I need to get past, and I'm more concerned about keeping my dog away from the dog than I am from the person. So you can see that I'm going to handle her by circling all the way up to these people. I'm circling and circling and circling. She does say hi to the person. I don't really care. And we continue on our way. She's excited because she saw the dog. So that basically means all the way back I circled. Notice that I don't pivot on a spot. I am walking a circle. She comes along, she's going to pull again because she's excited, and we circle again. This is our next lesson. All right, this is straight out of the car. She's much calmer already. She's learning. This is a narrower path. Leash tightens. We make a circle. The circle is tighter just because I'm on a tighter path, but I could have made the circle bigger. Give your dog time to stop and sniff. It's not that the dog can't be a dog. Let the dog be a dog. Now we're having a nice walk. Here we go. I'm not walking that fast. She tightens. That's beautiful. That is actually exactly what I want to see on a walk. I don't want my dog interacting with me. I want her interacting with the environment. But I don't want to suffer. There, I decided to call her back. Why not? I decided to say, hello, you're a wonderful dog. I scratched her head. Feel free to incorporate that kind of training in the middle of your walk. And then we start heading back. She's very quiet. I called her again. I said, oh, I give you a little snuggle because you're a good girl. This is when I would use food, by the way. I don't use food in this method. But if I'm going to, it would be if I decided to play with her. So I just decided to do a little training to entertain myself. I did not use food. I just used praise, and then we played a little bit. And then when I was done, I said, all right, you can go back to being a dog. And I let her go on her merry way after we did a few things. And then I set her free. But we played a little first. But it's important to me that then when I tell her to go on and be a dog, that she goes on and be a dog. I don't necessarily need her staring at me or coming back, which is actually why I choose not to bring food. I really don't want to even deal with that. In her case, it doesn't matter because she wouldn't take it anyway. But if you have a dog that would, ask yourself what you're trying to accomplish on the walk. And if you want it to just be relaxed, you might not want to use food. It's your choice. Now a person is coming. I was prepared to circle, but I didn't need to because she was calm. If you have a dog that is reactive, I can tell you right now that not approaching things head on is a really good idea. So if you see something coming at you, just start to circle and circle. You can circle your way closer, no problem, but use the circles. All right, so what I want you to think about from there, keep your feet moving where you want to go. We don't necessarily want the dog running circles around us. Not that I care, but I think it'll make you dizzy. So keep your feet facing the direction of travel, and your dog will notice it. So they'll know which direction you're generally moving. Avoid approaching distractions head on if you possibly can, and let the dog look around. Stop walking and let them sniff if they sniff. Let them look at things. All right, here we have Milo. This is his fourth lesson. The first one is going to start, I put them out of order because the first one makes him, shows the issue the most strongly because he's being difficult. He has some challenges. First of all, he's a strong puller. He's just a strong dog. The second thing is a very hard mouth for treats in public. You will see that. High interest in squirrels. And it just so happens, unfortunately, that for this handler, she doesn't have a lot of places to walk the dog where she is not going to encounter squirrels. And that really does make it hard because that's a very strong distraction with a big dog and a small handler. 70-pound dog with a small handler. Right off the bat, when you're talking about a situation where the dog weighs 1/2 or more the proportion of the handler, that's hard. Amateur owner. So he's not with a professional trainer, but he is with someone who's committed to regularly training him. So not a pet person. He tends towards over-arousal and he tends towards frustration. So those are challenges for her. The advantage she has is that she has been working with him over time. He is used to the idea of being trained in public. All right, let's take a look at Milo here. Look, that's a nice leash. It's loose. Now, one thing we did learn about this dog as we continued, staring is a bad idea. If he is allowed to stare at squirrels, it just makes him worse and worse and worse. Some dogs, maybe staring at the squirrels would make them calmer, but a lot of dogs know probably staring is not a good idea. Because what you're going to see is that he tends to make bad decisions after he stares. Now you can see she's got food in her hand. She's going to try to use it, but watch what happens. She gives him the food, he snags it, he gives nothing. He gives nothing to her at all. So the food is not changing his behavior one iota. As a matter of fact, it's almost like he's irritated. It's like he snags it out of habit and then he goes back to what he's doing. If this was my dog, I would not bother using food if this was the reaction I was getting from the dog, because it's just not helping. But the staring does not lighten as he continues to do it. That would be an example of a situation where treat him as if he was reactive to dogs, right? You wouldn't let him stare with that expression if it was a dog. You don't want to do it with a squirrel. Now she's got her work cut out for her here. He tightens. She does a nice job.
Oh,
she gets her circling. She does a good job
left.
there. And notice that she lets him go closer to the grass. That's great. Let the dog use the time that they circle to get closer. But look at that.
Okay.
Look how intensely he's broken. She did a nice job there, sort of insisting on the circle. I love that she let him go to the tree. She's letting him explore, and each circle takes him closer to things he cares about. Nice loose leash here. She's letting him stare. I would say 1,000, 2, 1,000, and then forward he has to go. That was lovely. She loosened the leash. That's very nice. But this is too long for this dog to be allowed to stare. She just should say, come on, let's go. And away they go. Up, up, let's go. And he would come along. Now, what's going to happen here? He's obviously looking at a squirrel.
I think I went up.
She's trying to break through with food. When she pulls on the leash, that's a classic example of opposition reflex. Did you see what happened as she pulled the leash? He just used that as an opportunity to lean into the leash and build opposition. Good for her for loosening the leash, and now she's just going to break him through. That is exactly what I would have done 15 seconds earlier. When you have a big dog, be careful about not letting your hands get away from your body, because what happens is you lose leverage. You really want to have both hands on the leash in close. She did a nice job bending her knees, but that spot, that area is too much for him. He needs to be returned to the road, which she does here very nicely. And she could just stand there circling really quite a bit longer. Just remember to make sure be careful about running and letting your hand go out wide from your body. You lose too much leverage. So you want your hands in front and close to you if you have a really strong dog. I like that she's letting him sniff here and look around. Nice loose leash there. That's very relaxing. That looks nice. But if you look at his ears, you can tell that was lovely. So that time she broke through before he had a chance to make mischief, and she kept moving. That was fantastic. He does not do well with staring. Again, beautiful. She got back to moving before he had a chance to make trouble. And circle. There she goes. Good job. Now, this time I think she does take him a little bit. No, she doesn't. She continues on. But that's still a lighter. He's still lighter on the leash there than he was when he's allowed to stare. What we're looking for is progress. And with each dog, you're going to want to tweak it a little bit to fit the dog you have. There's no reason not to circle just for fun. It's not really a punishment. It's just allowing the dog to move faster than she is. She's doing a fantastic job here. And he's actually starting to lighten up a little. You can tell it's in his ears. This dog, you watch his ears, you can see what you have. When he's moving on a circle, the intensity drops. See, there's he's intense. Once she gets him moving and circling, it drops. If he's moving and lunging, you'll see the same expression. That's too long for him to stand and watch. It just builds up energy so that when he does start to move, there he goes. He's over the top, right? So if she had not allowed the staring, he would have done better there. That you just have to break through. Now,
see it.
She's behind him. There she has better leverage. You want to be on the side of the dog. Did you see how she sort of ran forward with him? You don't want to do that. You want to stay, in that case, more in the road and away. He doesn't like that. He wants to do what he wants to do. You don't want to let your arm go out wide from your body. You just don't have enough leverage. And then I worry that she's going to get hurt because he does jerk. He's staring here. Look at his nose. Obviously, this is important to him. She just needs to get him moving again, get him off the grass and moving, walking, circling.
2 of them.
And that's fine. So she's just pulling. She's just saying, we're going to go. We're going to, good. That was lovely. So one could say, well, he doesn't like being pulled. That's true, but neither does she. So this has to work for everyone. She's not hurting him by saying, we're going to move on. It's time to move on. We're not going to stare. There she goes. You want to be careful about that hand moving away from the body. That loses, that loses a little too much strength. There she goes. Very nice. Back to her circle. Excellent. Probably with this dog, I would never have the leash only in one hand because he's too likely to jerk and leap, and then she's at risk. She can get hurt that way. So we want to be careful about that. There she goes. All right. For this dog, you really want to think about keeping your feet facing the correct direction. I talked about that too. Don't let him obsess. 3 seconds is enough time. Don't run if he starts to pull. You'll want to think about the size of the circles. Sometimes he did better with tighter circles and sometimes he did better with more open circles. Have a clear direction of travel. So on that road, he really did his best when she was on the road. Ideally, the circle takes your dog to what they want, because when the dog is moving, you can be continuing forward and the dog can end up at the tree or whatever. The balance, though, and this dog shows that, is yes, that's good, but at the same time, in his case, I think this dog does better not being allowed to circle back towards triggers, and for him, a squirrel is a trigger. But if it's just a smell on the ground, I would let him circle closer and closer to the smell. All right, this dog is Bras. He's had 4 lessons here. They are going to be strung together. He is a strong puller. That is a challenge. He's not interested in food if he's excited enough. He just wants the world. He has a strong need for movement and sniffing. He's very interested in walking areas and trails. That's very typical, and that's what she has access to. Again, the handler's been working with him, so that gives her a real benefit. This is her first lesson. You can see he's pulling. She circles nicely. There's some leash handling issues there. You really want to make sure the leash isn't hitting the ground. So try to keep that wrapped up in your hands. She does better and better as she continues to train. That's much better right there. Nice circle. Notice that the circles bring him closer to things he's interested in. That's nice. There, he tightened up the leash, so she's circling again. Not perfect leash handling there. See all that dangling leash? It makes it very easy for him to surge. This is very nice. She's on her second lesson. He tightens up the leash there. Beautiful leash handling. Really good. And do you notice that as she moves forward, it takes him closer to things that interest him? Nice loose leash, a little tight. She circles. It was the tree he was interested in. Notice how the circle took him to the tree. That reduces his frustration. If his frustration is down, he can think. Third lesson. He's starting to do what I call skiing. He's in front of her. He's using more of the path than she is. She's thinking, and now watch, this is actually very interesting. So he's going to stand and stare, and then he circled on his own. Great, fine. No frustration, happy dog, everybody's doing well.
Falling.
That's beautiful. He's just zigzagging back and forth, keeping a nice loose leash all by himself. Really pretty. That's exactly what I want to see. I want to see him exercising, except he pulled too hard, but she's going to let him get to that tree. Really nice handling here. And he's going to pee on the tree. He's a dog. Now he's going to stop and look, but notice that there is slack in the leash. So he made a choice to come back and loosen the leash on his own. This is his last lesson here. He's learning to sniff and walk, which is great, but he does keep the leash loose. Now he stopped to look. He circled on his own. Nicely done. And she continues on. Can you see how this is less frustrating for the handler too? Because everybody gets to have a walk. That's skiing, going back and forth like that across the path. As long as you're 6 feet out, it's no problem. Now, if the dog was doing that right in front of you, that could get old pretty fast. That was beautiful. Notice he's not really checking in. That's because she's not using food. If she wants him to check in, she could say his name, or she could teach checking in. Now, this is interesting. He tightens the leash, but on his own, he loosened that leash. So he started to pull hard, and then he just remembered, oh, that doesn't actually work for me. And he just stopped. There he goes again. He pulls hard, but then he circled. He stopped on his own. Pulling, lightening up on his own. That's only 4 lessons. That's pretty good that he's already kind of figured it out. Now, she's going to stop and wait. She wants him to say, oh, you exist. He did. He looked up. She said, fine, then we're going to continue on our way. She did a fantastic job with this. Things that I want you to think about on that video. Notice the importance of the leash handling. It does matter. Try to use both hands. Try not to let one hand get pulled out away from you so that if the dog does circle back quickly, you can get jerked because they have too much room. She chose an easier path before a more difficult one. That's something to think about. And notice how the dog begins to ski in front of her, back and forth, with moderate leash tension when he understands. Those were the ones I wanted to show you more as case studies. This is much quicker. It's a compilation of several dogs to illustrate a variety of points. This dog, classic skiing. The handler, she doesn't have sidewalks. She's moving in the middle of the street. Notice how she goes back and forth. She has found that for her dog, when the leash tightens a little bit right there, if she just changes over to the other side, he loosens it on his own. This is after she taught him how to circle. So she still uses circles when he pulls hard in a given direction, but this is where she ended up. After just a few lessons, he decided on his own that it was more comfortable to ski back and forth and then walk nicely. So she did a super nice job. And this is a young dog, and young dogs are excitable. Here we have a big dog, strong dog. She stops. He does not circle on his own. She has to bring him around with the leash, and then they continue on his way. Big dog, though. He's going to, he probably weighs as much as she does. Now here she has to kind of help him around. He says, but I want to go forward. And Chrissy says, I know you want to go forward. You're not going to go forward. We're going to do a little circle. And now we'll go forward. Huge difference for this dog just in 1 or 2 sessions. This handler is lunging her dog in the parking lot before she goes out. As you can see, he's high movement. You can hear his feet scrabbling on the ground. He's excited. So she's just going to do like I did with Lyra. She's going to work down some of that energy in the parking lot before she starts on her way. Now they're on the path. You can hear his little feet scrabbling. She changes direction and says, okay, you want to go this way instead? That's fine. Notice she lets him go right back to where he wanted to go. Huge benefit for this dog. Somebody's coming down the path. You are absolutely welcome to bring your dog back to you. Sorry for the child video camera here. Bring your dog back to you. That's the place where you want to use food. If you're going to use food, use it to help you with the distractions. Here she's just circling back and forth in the same area. But you can see how much lighter he is on the leash, and this is all in one lesson. He's already pulling much less hard. So see how he starts to give to the leash there? She could do a little bit more with leash handling there. This is Burrito's very first lesson because I figured out I cared. Notice how he settles in. He says, I want to go that way. I gave him longer leash. He's on a 10-foot leash. That works for him. We spend a little time just working in this area just to give him the idea. I give him as much leash as I can. Now you can see he's a little dog and see how fast his little feet are able to move. That's perfect. I don't have to do as much. I'm just not going to let him settle in. That angle of leash is perfect. When you are on the side of the dog, you have leverage. He looked at me, he gave to me, fine. When I see that, I take him where he wants to go. All right, here we go on our walk. We've crossed the street. We're zooming along. He's pulling a little too hard. I backed up just a bit. I'm letting him look. I circle around, but notice I get going. So he has lots of time to think and move. He's a dog, let him sniff. You can already see him starting to give to the leash tension. He feels the end. He recognizes the futility. He comes back. Lots of nice leash handling here. You'll notice that he has some slack here. I back up just a bit, but I try not to let that leash dangle. I did not make him circle on that last one. He didn't need it. He gave to me. He came back. Now I'm going to make him circle. He chose not to go back in the same direction. That's kind of typical of Burrito. He's just busy. You know, he goes, oh, I want to go this way. So I wait. When he gives to me, I'm perfectly happy to take him back over there, but being Burrito, he's often perfectly happy just to continue on his way. That's fine too. I decided to add some training. So I did a recall. He was eating grass. I didn't want him to eat quite that much. So I said, come. I called him. And then I gave him a cookie for coming back. That's a great use of cookies in the middle of the walk. That time, because he came back to me so nicely, I just said, fine, you don't even have to circle. You can just come back. But he went to lunging again. So I said, okay, we'll circle this time. I let him back into the area he wanted to explore. But that's as far as I've decided I'm willing to go. I don't want to walk in the mud on this day. So that's going to be it. That's my line in the sand. He can pull all he wants. I'm going to bend my knees. I'm going to keep my hands close to my body. I'm going to think about my leash handling. And we're going to go. Now we're on our way home. Oh, I must have called him again. He was a good boy. He got a cookie for that. Do make a point of petting your dogs in addition to giving them cookies. And we're walking back. Now he's a little less energetic on the way back. You don't see that as much because I cut so much of these videos, but he is. The occasional circle just to remind him that I exist. All right, so let's talk about some of the things that are worth remembering. Keep your feet moving. Your feet and your body and where they are aiming show the direction of travel. And to be honest, it keeps you from getting dizzy. So think about that. Remember to stop, let the dog be a dog, because if you don't, you're going to build up frustration. Use movement to get the dog back to the preferred spot by circling to it. And think about the temperament of your dog, right? So most dogs, as long as you keep moving and you let them stop and sniff and be a dog, that's your ideal. Just remember, if you have a dog that's reactive, and when I say reactive, I mean overreacting to people, to dogs, to squirrels, to whatever. Circle, move. Don't let them stare. The goal, what I'm looking for here, lower frustration. I call this about loose leash walking, and I do that because that's what people are thinking about, but it's actually not what I'm thinking about in my own head. What I'm thinking about is getting everybody's needs met. I want to walk, I don't want to stand, and I don't want to train. My dog wants to sniff, and my dog wants to move their body. How can we bring those together so that I don't get jerked around, a big priority for me, and the dog gets their needs met as well at a speed they can maintain, not always about me. Keep the dog's frustration down and they learn better and you'll have much more fun on your walk. Think in terms of reducing your frustration, and then what you'll find is the learning occurs very rapidly, because as people have been reporting back to me, and I've been asking people to talk to me about their experiences, what they're saying is when the dog figures it out, they learn it so quickly. And it's not even like you have to try that hard. The dog just figures out what you want. All right, what are you going to do about a distraction? Don't avoid them. This is a little different than traditional loose leash walking. As long as the distraction's not over the top, and I think squirrels for some dogs would be over the top, but not all, it depends. Don't avoid them, prepare for them. If it's the right amount of distraction, first of all, ask yourself, can the dog have it? If it's a sniffing spot on the ground, then approach it on a circle. If the dog pulls, circle, but make sure that your forward direction takes you closer so that instead of backing the dog away, the dog gets closer and closer to what they want. That keeps frustration down. And then they get to it as a reward when they approach it on a loose leash. What if the dog cannot have it? Well, then you're either going to circle closer or further, depending on your dog. The dog we saw, Milo, with the squirrels, you have to circle further, because when he gets closer, he gets into trouble. But another dog might actually do just fine, just circling up to the tree. Treat the distraction as if the dog was reactive. That should work pretty well for most people. All right, leash handling. We want appropriate tension, not too loose, not too tight. If the leash is on the ground, it's too loose. If you feel tension and you see any sort of opposition reflex, it's too tight. You can back up to keep the leash correct, depending on the circumstances. That might make sense. Or you can just reel in the line. It depends on the circumstance. Most people said they preferred to use two hands and reel in the line, have it looped. You want to reduce arousal with the correct amount of leash tension. You want to look at the dog's temperament, and you want to avoid opposition reflex. Equipment. All right. What have we got? We have collars, we have front clip harnesses, we have back clip harnesses, and we have head halters. My personal preference first would be a collar because it's easiest to get the clip on the side of the dog's neck, and then the dog has no leverage to pull forward. You can pull the dog around quite easily if you need to. Front clip harness, I have not seen an example of somebody using this method using one, but intuitively it should work. The only thing I would suggest is try to flip the side that the leash is on occasion, or because it seems like it would start to really unbalance the dog physically. But I would think a front clip harness should work for you. Back clip harness, one of the dogs, Bros, I showed, was on a back clip harness. I personally am amazed at how well it worked because I would think that that would have encouraged more forward pulling, but the handler was able to make it work very effectively. So try it. If the dog keeps pulling hard enough in a forward direction that you can't get them a little bit off balance, because what you're doing when you put the clip on the side of the neck, you're able to pull the dog off balance pretty easily. If you can't with a back clip harness, reconsider your options. Do not use a head halter for this training. Head halters should be used very close to the handler and with a fairly tight line because you could really hurt the dog. If the dog jerked even a couple of feet on a head halter, I'd be very concerned. So I would hate to see anybody use a head halter for this kind of thing. Do you circle? What is the criteria for a circle? The handler decides. All right. You don't need 100% strict criteria for this. It's just not that important because remember, the primary purpose of this method is not to teach the dog loose leash walking. When you're trying to train the dog, when your whole point is to keep the dog conscious of what's happening, then your criteria has to be as crisp as possible. And that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to circle to reduce the dog's frustration, because then the dog will just intuit what you want over time, and it's more of a casual, oh, this is working for me, oh, I feel a little pressure, oh, I think I'll move into the pressure. So yeah, I'm sure if you could have 100% strict criteria, you could learn a tiny bit faster, but it's just not that important. If you feel a little uncomfortable, like you're being pulled, circle. And remember, the circle is not really a punisher. It's just a change, and it reminds the dog you exist, and the dog sees you, and then the dog moves, that lowers frustration, the dog can think again. Go on your way. It's the same thing some people use food. The dog is doing something, they stop and they feed the dog. It's not like there's a criteria. They just say the dog's getting over aroused. I think I'll stop and drop food on the ground, which is fine, by the way. I would say I think the dog's getting over aroused. I think I'll make a circle. It's the same concept. It's not like there's a criteria that you drop food on the ground. There's a criteria for circling. Don't make it complicated. Should you use food in your training? That's your choice. If you have a reactive dog and you're working on reactivity, yeah. If you want to teach check-ins or recalls, I would use food. I would bring it. If you wanted to work on leave it, I would bring it. The thing is, I'm not using the food to work on the loose leash training. I'm using the food to train behaviors that I'm looking for. So it's a little different. And honestly, it probably makes the food more effective when you do use it because it's not just all the time. Part 4, problem solving. Is it working? All right, well, is the frustration level of the dog and the handler dropping? That's big. Does the dog begin to circle or zigzag? Remember the skiing with light leash pressure? It's working. Is your dog more relaxed? It's working. Is the handler staying on the dog's radar or on the periphery? Is the dog vaguely more aware of you than they were before? It's working. It means you're breaking the dog's hold on the environment. I only want to be 10% on the radar on a walk, but I want to be on there somewhere. If you're seeing these things, if when you leave the house, you and the dog are in a better frame of mind, excellent, it's working. But what if it's not getting better? What if you feel like you're trying all these things, you've messed around with your choices, you're not happy, then it's not working. What if the dog ping-pongs on the leash, hits one end, turns, runs, and hits the other? First of all, really take a hard look at your leash handling and your length of leash and tension. You need to shorten up that leash. The dog cannot ping pong if the leash is short, and you might be doing some fairly tight circles with a fairly tight leash while you get the dog a little bit more in their head and then start loosening that leash, but keep those circles going. You might have to add some backing up as you're circling and pulling in the leash. And then as the dog relaxes, you're going to lengthen the leash again. All right, what if the dog is fine in open areas but cannot handle a path? the first thing is we're going to look for some middle ground. Can you find an area that isn't quite as tight as this picture you see here, but isn't huge and open? The reports I've gotten back from people is the dogs actually do better on paths that have a direction of travel than they did in open areas where they wander. I did not find that intuitive, but that's why I asked for feedback on the method. So if you're in a huge open area and it's a mess, tighten up to a tighter trail. And if you're on a too tight trail, see if you can't find something that's more open. Go ahead and try lunging the dog before you start onto the path in the parking lot, like you saw the Belgian Shepherd. Go back and forth over the same territory. That can really help too. So go out for, a half a mile or a mile, come back, go out. It's really interesting the first few times you do this. It's very uncomfortable. Humans want to go. We have a destination. But if you find that when you work territory the dog has already been on, that they're calmer, then the dog can start getting the idea of the circles and what's working, and that puts them in a better frame of mind. The dog won't circle. The dog says, forget that. Well, if the dog will take food, no worries. Just bring out a cookie, clap, up, 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 bring the dog around with a cookie, encourage them, no problem. Gently pull the dog around to start to get the dog following. That's what you saw with the big dog. I think it's a Cane Corso earlier on. She just pulled the dog around. She didn't hurt it, but she did say, no, we're going to go this way. Time and patience. If you just stand there and wait, you and the dog can have a little standoff for a while, but eventually the dog's going to be like, this is boring. And then when you call, come on, the dog eventually is going to come even just a few steps for you. Continue on your way. You'll get closer and closer to full circles eventually. And partial circles may be fine. Remember, what's the end goal? Reduce frustration. What if you find that your dog does partial circles and is happy, and full circles and is not happy? Well, then do partial circles. What if the dog is surging towards distractions? Remember, approaching on a circle is hugely beneficial. Don't let the dog, because as they get closer and closer, they get more and more excited. Circling and circling, that'll make them excited, and then it reduces. Excited and reduces, and they're getting closer. Remember, you have to make a choice. Are you going to approach or are you going to move further away? Depends on the dog and the distractions. Some dogs might really benefit from initial practice in a much easier area. The handler gets dizzy. A longer leash will help. A more open circle, and make sure that you look where you are going. Don't spin on a spot. Look where you are going a little ways out and walk the circle. The dog will notice that and will follow your circle. What if you also have reactivity and behavior? Bring food. Work on that. You can train your dog. Incorporate other calming work. So for example, you're walking along, a distraction comes, bring your dog back to a sit at heel. No problem. And use food and train. That's great. Use food scatters if they work for you. No problem at all. Use snuffle bats if that works for you. Circle when you see the thing in the distance to start breaking the dog's concentration. No problem. Actually, I really like this method for reactive dogs because the dog doesn't lock in on the thing and it tells the handler what to do. Because sometimes handlers don't know what to do when the thing is approaching. Just circling, circling, circling. Tell them what to do. You can also use those circles to gain distance and split the dog's attention from the thing. Is it time to stop this method? Well, nothing works for all dogs, so here are things I want you to look at. If you find that the circles are actually agitating your dog, especially a reactive dog, this is maybe not a winner for you. If the handler doesn't like it, the handler's not happy, may not be the method for you. If the dog is not happy, this may not be the method for you. Or if safety is an issue, you've noticed that the dog, the handler, or other people are at risk, you need to rethink that. Thank you for joining me. So we're going to stop this now and we're going to go to the webinar and I will address the questions. I did tell you once before to put questions in, so hopefully I already have a bunch to work with and we'll work on that part now. Thank you.